Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I'm very happy to have our one of our sponsors, Vizsla Silver, on. They had great news out yesterday with a updated mineral resource and silver and gold, and they quite a substantial increase in the resource. Well done, Michael.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. It's a great way to start the year, and really proud of the work that our whole team put into that and this outcome. It's really incredible.
You know, Michael, I'm very bullish on silver, and I always like to buy metals in the ground. And I'm really having a hard time finding a lot of great silver stories. You know, you got a great story because you can build the resource, you're a developer, and you got a tremendous exploration potential.
Yeah, we're fortunate. It's a very exciting story, and I think it all boils down to what you just mentioned there. We have Project One, which is our PEA area, the area that we just updated the resource on. It's in silver terms, it's substantial, but I think it's worth even looking at that resource in gold equivalent terms, and depending on the ratio you use. But on the lower end, if you use a really conservative ratio, it's about 4 million ounces of gold at about 6 grams globally. 2 million of those 4 million ounces would be at Copala, and that would be at about 8 grams gold equivalent. So it is a world class gold deposit. It's knocking on the door of 5 million ounces. But of course, it's silver primary, which is ideal because there is a scarcity of silver projects out there. There's only a handful of any real silver projects of any scale and size that can be developed, and we have that just on Project One, which is in the west. And then, of course, we have 86 kilometers of veins to explore in the original Panuco district. Then we bought another district to the north in Lagara. We added 10,000 hectares, basically along strike of these major faults to the south at San Enrique and Richard, which are other two concessions we bought last year. And I think we're probably going to see an increase in land package in 2025. So, we really are building what I believe is the premier silver exploration, development, and soon to be production company.
You know, when you talk about that, it reminds me of SilverCrest. SilverCrest was a great pick in my reports. I started picking it before they went into production, and now that they're getting taken over, it's been a great pick. But I was kind of saddened that they did get taken over because I believe that they would have been able to use that success. I mean, they started out owing $100 million to build the mine. They, within 3 quarters of full commercial production, they built that their cash, they paid off all the debt and built up their cash to over $150 million in cash, gold, and silver. So, that's like a year's worth, year and a half worth of production did that. But the knocks against them were that they were a one mine project company and that they had a fairly small resource. And when I look at Vizsla, I think that it could be on a similar path, but avoid some of those knocks.
Well, the interesting thing, of course, in SilverCrest, obviously Vizsla has a huge amount of respect for Eric and Chris and the team there. They've done a great job. It was a huge success, and one that our team, our COO Simon Smirlik was intimately involved with, through his role at Ausenco, where they built that mill on a lump sum turnkey basis. But
By the
where
way, built it during COVID and during an inflationary period, and they still brought it in production on time, on budget.
exactly. So it's they proved their worth there, I think. But with the interesting contrast, I would say Vizsla to Silvercrest, and again, coming out of a place of respect for Silvercrest, is that we truly have a district here that we consolidated, we brought together, and that's referring to the original 7,300 hectare uh, Copala Panuco district. And there's other differentiations. So, it's right off a highway, it's under a power line. There's 400 years of mining history here. So it's got that great pedigree. But now to think that we've tripled that land package in 2024, I think there's probably more to come in 2025. Our vision here isn't to be a 10-year mine life. Our vision here is to be, a 100-year mine life like these other huge districts in Mexico. And I think that the shareholders can be rewarded very handsomely with organic growth out of our land package here in Mexico. And it also gives us, if we look forward into the future, it also gives us leverage when you're looking at other M&A deals or ways to grow through mergers, i.e., Vizsla acquiring something for growth. Because you can always say to a potential target when you're negotiating, well, we don't need to acquire you. It's not like we're running out of mine life here. We could just go drill over here on these known veins and probably come up with XYZ resource and build a mill for $700 million, et cetera, et cetera. And you can just really point to this organic growth throughout the district here. And at least that's the vision that we have here. This is what we're gravitating towards, we're building towards. But even on its own, if you were to just take all of that away, that's kind of, strategic, organic growth thinking, that type of thing. If you were to just look at the plain vanilla facts that we have here, including this updated resource and that PEA that we have, that PEA is going to very quickly turn into a feasibility in 2025. It is a world-class, it has the scope to become the world's largest silver equivalent, silver primary producer, even bigger than Juanicipio, I believe. So it's really exciting. Of course, Vizsla owns this project 100%. We have 120 million Canadian, about 90 something odd million dollars US in the bank. So we're funded for all of these objectives we have in 2025. So I'm coming into 2025 just kind of so thrilled and so excited, and can't wait to see how we progress throughout the year here.
Well, you mentioned Juanicipio, and that brings up Fresnillo PLC. And that's not just a throwaway there, folks. You should pay attention to that because Fresnillo PLC is the lowest cost silver producer in the world. And one of their big new mines in joint venture with Mag Silver is the Juanicipio mine just outside the town of Fresnillo. And Fresnillo is about an hour and a half away from Panuco.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but the discoverer, the conquistador of that made the Panuco discovery, also discovered Fresnillo and Durango. So Panuco was his third and final kind of major silver district city discovery. Of course, Fresnillo and Durango have both gone on over the subsequent 400 years to become some of the most important mining hubs in the world, certainly for silver. But for whatever reason, Panuco was just one of these that never really turned. Well, it's mountainous. It's a little different than the topography you find in those other places. And of course, Mazatlan, which is less than an hour away, became very important as well. So it did have a major role, but in modernity, in modern times, it hasn't had the chance to really develop the same as, say, a Fresnillo district. And that's what we see that we're doing here right now is really putting that effort, that money, the investment into developing Panuco, Copala, and our region there in Mexico, and to becoming one of these very important major silver equivalent producers and major silver districts in the world.
Well, and when you talk about Fresnillo, it's very interesting because they kind of have three pods of clusters. One was a cluster of epithermal veins right under the town of Fresnillo. Then right beside it is the
All the canyons.
Salcito district, and then right beside that is the Juanicipio veins. And so if you look at that, it's only about maybe 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers. They've got, mining there for 500 years. And you could fit that a few times into Panuco's land package.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's at the risk of overusing this phrase, I often think it's like getting in a time machine and going back in history and being able to assemble one of these major districts here in Panuco, and that's why we've been aggressive with our property purchases. Certainly in 2024, because we feel like we have that unique advantage in this region of Mexico. We've got an incredible team led by Hernando Riuda, who's our director of Mexico, manages what we do in Mexico, and he's built up this great team that's I would say all tier one, and we can go in and I think create a lot of value with properties that we source in that area. So, again, we're focused on project number one becoming a world class top tier mine, and it will be in due time here. I think our target of 2027, halfway through 2027 and beyond, second half of 2027. Target for production, it's coming quick now. We're moving towards it. But we also think beyond that. We think, this is a generational opportunity here.
When I think about Panuco, it's really quite spectacular, and you kind of do put it into good context there. Like it's like going back to one of these great jurisdictions in Mexico, Fresnillo, the Zacatecas, San Dimas, a lot of these other jurisdictions, and being able to find something that rivals those today. And I think part of the reason why it was still available, if my memory serves me correctly, Michael, is that it was kind of a patchwork of projects, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even really say it was fully available. It was kind of a hard fought battle, but you're right. It was a patchwork. It was numerous different concession holders over the years, and then in the last, say, 20 years or so, two different families consolidated their halves of the district, and then we went in and consolidated those two halves. But each of those families had many different stakeholders, and it was big group of people that we had to kind of get on side. And what originally sounded like and was supposed to be and kind of advertised to us as Vizsla as a straightforward deal that was basically ready to be signed, turned into about a year in Mexico. And as my Simon and Craig often mention, it was a time where I was having my first child, and in the middle of the night, my wife was getting progressively bigger and bigger, and the birthday was becoming more and more imminent, and I'd have to just go in the middle of the night down to Mexico and work on this deal. Something would fall apart, and so it was kind of looking back at this fond memories, but really kind of a hectic and stressful time at the time. But it was all fun, and it all worked out great. So
Well, I've been in that situation living down here in Mexico for the last 9 years, where I sat down with families and tried to negotiate. And that was just one family. I was trying to negotiate a past producer and get my hands on it. And so I know the challenges, and the other part of it is, Michael, these families really know what they got, and they weren't giving you this for free. You had to pay, you had to roll the dice there on that deal early when you were just a tiny company.
yeah, we $43 million total deal value was a lot when our market cap was about 15 million Canadian, and that was the stock doing well at 15 million. So. But when there's something valuable there, we figured it was kind of binary, right? You go and you drill, and if it wasn't worth it, you wouldn't mind not having to pay that 43 million. That'd be fine. But if it was something that was really worth it, of course, it would be worth that 43 million and more, right? Now, of course, our market cap is 10 times, 10, 12, 13 times that in US dollars. We're a New York listed company. So clearly there's return on investment there. We've been one of the few companies that actually, has that return on invested capital represented in our market cap. It's often that's
The other way.
you'll be looking at buying something for $10 million that a major spent $100 million on drilling, right? And nobody wants it anymore. So
Yeah.
it's one of the rarest things in these junior mining companies. But we're expecting that, and we're confident that the return on capital that we're going to see on the capex is going to be, many times this as well too. Obviously, we have an industry leading NPV to capex ratio, which is a great metric to demonstrate that. So five to one. I think SilverCrest is like 4-1. I haven't really seen 5-1 in any type of new build real mine scenario, really almost ever, I think, in my career.
Well, the way I look at that, I've always been challenged with NPV because you're trying to go forward and then come back to today, and you got to use conservative numbers and all this. And, I've always been challenged with that NPV analysis. But the way I look at it is your capex, you're trading at a multiple of your capex to build the mine. So, a lot of times, Michael, projects like yours and companies like yours, their 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 plans are to be taken over because they have to be. They don't
Yeah.
have the capex. They don't have the valuation to cover the capex. So they need a bigger partner to come in and take them over to build it. You're in the exact opposite situation. You're trading at multiples of the capex, and so this is easily something that Vizsla can build. You don't need a partner or a takeover.
No, exactly. And that's a big part of our KPIs for 2025 as well. And of course, 90 million plus USD in the bank right now. We're certainly not going to spend $90 million this year. Our budget's well covered. We've got about 10 million. I would say we'll spend less, probably, up to 10 million we'd spend on the test mine. Our drilling's a few $1 million. G&A is not that much. And, so we have basically 2025 covered very handsomely with the cash we have on hand, which means that a lot of that cash can go towards the equity component. Let's say the component of the capex that's not covered by debt, we have already in our till, which is great. I mean, that's a huge advantage. And I think that's another reason why we traded a multiple of capex, because I believe it's clear that we can demonstrate we're proficient in the capital market, so we can raise equity when it's the right time to do so. We also have about $25 million or so, $25 million worth of shares in VROY, which also takes away further equity dilution for capex. So I really think that there'll be a point in time this year where we'll see that Vizsla will become very close, at least on the project finance side, to being fully funded for the build of Panuco. And that oftentimes we get not criticism, but people say, well, how can you build a mill like this for $225 million? That seems too cheap or whatever. I mean, there's a few reasons. One, it's all about philosophy. You don't need a fancy office. You don't need, big landscaping and plants. I mean, not that that's so expensive, but it comes down to the philosophy of function over, over aesthetics or things like that. So, we look at CCAM camps and, CCAN office buildings, those types of things, very simple mill design, pretty much related to what Simon and Osenko built for SilverCrest. And if you look at those capex numbers, it's pretty reasonable to kind of extrapolate what we're looking at here. But it's also the fact that this project is directly under a power line off of a highway. Yeah, like we started the test mine. We actually didn't have to build any of our own roads. We just widened an existing trail there, and it took us right to the box cut that we're doing right now. So by the way, that box cut is almost done. First blast should be coming, weeks or so, maybe a month. But the test mine is humming along very nicely right now, which is great. So you look at all this stuff, and then the other thing when it comes to capex, of course, is Copala is very close to surface. Right. So we're not having to do a huge amount of development, sunk capital into development early. But of course, that's why we're doing our test mine now too, right? To get that advance in the mining. So you look at this and you think, okay, well, $225 million. Our goal is to not go backwards into the feasibility study. Hopefully that'll be the case. We're still working on the feasibility study now. But if that range, we believe we can keep that range of, call it $225 million. The cash we have on hand covers a large portion of what we expect that capex will be.
Like about 30% of it.
Yeah,
Even
exactly.
after you spend over this year, you'd still
Yeah,
probably have close to 30%.
exactly. And that gets really close to that 60-40 that we're looking at for debt, right? 60 debt, 40 equity. So and then again,
Well,
that
and that's something else. When you're looking at funding it partially by debt, if you can pay that debt off in 99 months, that's not a big deal. The lender wants to lend you the money because they're going to make their money quick. But it's not like it's a big nut to crack.
well, certainly when we're looking at, and again, this is a PEA cash flow that shows about 20 million ounces in the first 2 years on average of production. But if you look at the numbers that we have now in the M&I, you see that we have 220 million ounces of silver equivalent in M&I. Importantly, we have 43 million ounces in measured, which is effectively 2 years, call it, at the PEA rate. But those grades are spectacular. So the grade has gone up in those first 2 years of mine life in that mine plan, which effectively says that we, likely could produce more
And
ounces in
folks, that's
years.
because what's really interesting about that is as they get more density of their drilling, where they're sort of drilling like this, I guess, when they get more holes closer together, you get a more representative grade. And as they're doing that tighter drilling, the grade is going up. And that's a nice trend to have.
Yeah, it's the rarest of things. Typically, you lose ounces and you lose grade when you do that type of thing. And conversely, you only really see this in tier one projects. And so we're thrilled to see that. And so I suspect that that we talk about 9 months payback in the PEA. I think that's incredible. Anything less than a year is really incredible, but it's looking like we may see an increase in grade. Again, I'm not trying to. I don't want to overpromise or anything like that. It's just kind of my interpretation of what I see in this resource. If I were to look at 222 million ounces and 10-year give or take mine life, you see the average come up from what we had in the PEA. So we're thrilled with this. I honestly just can't wait to get cracking at this. There's a few things standing in the way. Of course, we got to put the feasibility study out. That's something that we can control, and then there's something that we can't control necessarily, which is the permits. But I was spending time. I think when we last spoke, I was in Mexico. You'll notice I'm finally in my office. I think it's our first interview that I'm in my office, which means I've got reliable Wi-Fi and no one's pounding on the door like they were at the hotel that I was on the first interview. But but I was in Mexico towards the end of the year, meeting with the government, and they basically they filled us with hope. They really seem to want to permit mines, certainly mines like Panuco, which they have silver, which they consider critical mineral. We're in a already disturbed area, so the mill site is actually a disturbed area. The portal's on a disturbed area from previous mining, so we're actually not disturbing any new, fresh, what would you call it, environment. It's not like we're disturbing an existing kind of untouched environment. It's all undisturbed land, which I suspect will be useful in our permitting process. The other thing is that this is a wet region. It's not a dry region. It's not a overly agricultural
I
region.
know, I've been there. It's all
Yeah.
green. When you
Yeah.
drive through there, everything's green. And if
Yeah.
it's green in Mexico, there's water there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm hoping that we can get the majority of our water from either underground sources like old workings, things like that, which we've located a number of them that have really great water supply, and also groundwater or rainwater capture, from the wet season. So, we aim to be as minimally impactful as possible to the environment. One of the things that I think is really great, and this has been Simon's philosophy, is that, and he's always talked about this, that he wants to basically build a mine that nobody sees or hears or sees any of the negative effects from. If you're sitting in the Copala town, you wouldn't be able to see the mill, you wouldn't be able to hear the mill, you wouldn't be able to hear the mining. Um, but they get, they obviously see the economic benefits of that, and so that.
That reminds me of some of the drives that I've done around Zacatecas and Fresnillo. And, so much silver has come out of these two cities. I think it's like 10% of the silver ever produced worldwide has come from the state of Zacatecas. And you drive around and you can't see nothing.
Yeah.
The only thing you can see is the buildings around Juanicipio. You don't see anything. You drive around, you don't see anything. So Simon's goal there, I think, is quite achievable.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, the other thing, of course, is that there is a lot of vegetation, which helps too. But the topography, the way we have the mill located in the topography, I think it is quite possible. It's funny because there's a mill right off of the highway in that general area that I didn't know about for a few months. We were driving past it, and I just never never saw it. So there's tons of stuff like that in Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Getting back to your point there about Scheinbaum, the new president, she's from the same party as AMLO. But I'm in Mexico, so I see a lot, and I'm a mining guy, so I see a lot of what's going on. And I think there's a big sea change in that party. That AMLO was very anti-mining. Well, to a degree, mine still went on and still got built during his term. Two terms, I think it was, but or no, one term. It's a 6-year uh, term. I've noticed that Scheinbaum has made some really interesting steps like recently, the mining minister was talking about how, you need open pit mining to do roads and stuff like that. And I think they've softened the attitude towards open pit mining. And I don't really think that there ever was any opposition towards underground mining.
no, I don't think so, and I suspect that it's just important to. I think what the concerns are, at least from what I see, is the perception that Canadian mining companies would come to Mexico and behave in a manner that they wouldn't behave in the U.S. or Canada, and I think that's actually a very fair, standpoint, right? I think what they refer,
Maybe in the long past.
yeah.
But nowadays, the last 10, 15 years, I
No, I
don't
don't think
think
it's
so.
true, but I think it's a perception.
Oh, okay, I got you, got you.
So I think it's up to Canadian companies and people that are we're guests in the country of Mexico. You need to demonstrate that you're operating from a place of respect and things like that, which is really kind of part of our core values. So you're right. I think that was probably a 30-40 year kind of stigma from mining companies back in the day. But if that's the threshold is to behave the same we would in Canada, the U.S., I think Vizsla is fully capable of doing that, and we've proven that already in our 5-year history.
And I've seen it on the ground here. When I travel around, just the other day, I saw a guy in a truck from Camino Rojo,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
up in the northern part of the States. I said, "Oh, Camino Rojo." And these people are so proud to work in the mining business. And I have another friend that his sister is actually works for Silver Standard,
Hmm.
SSVR, I think their name is now. But what her job is she goes to the local communities around the mine and helps them learn how to grow food for their local consumption. We don't hear a lot about this sort of stuff in mining, but it's quite incredible because the pride that these people, the Mexicans, have for this kind of programs, they love Canadian mining companies down
Oh
here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we've always had. I mean, we've always come from a place of the it's part of our our core values that we have on the wall. But it's a golden rule, right? You put yourself in the shoes of the people living there. You wouldn't, it's the same as if a Mexican company came to Canada and wanted to build a mine. You'd hope that they would think, about the communities that they operate in. And to your point, we actually have a nursery that we started. So I think we're probably the only group that's ever germinated certain species of plants in this area of Sinaloa. And so we have this nursery. We've got thousands of little seedlings that we're going in, and we've already started replanting areas, which is pretty cool. And the guacamaya birds, I think, like certain of these trees, so we're starting to see more of the birds, and it's been pretty interesting. It's been a really fulfilling part of what we're doing there. Of course, a lot of times I have to be a little bit sensitive to this because a lot of times companies will just kind of say this stuff and and kind of wave the
Don't
ESG
follow
flag.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't really, we don't do it necessarily to be cheesy, but it's just something that I think is kind of quite interesting that we're germinating these plants probably for the first time in history here in Sinaloa. And we do have a lot of the people from the community work at the nursery as well, and so that's been pretty interesting. But I was going to say, you mentioned that you're driving around and you only see the buildings from Fresnillo there at Juanicipio. If you drive along the highway, the not the toll highway, but the small highway, you'll see Vizsla. Well, our subsidiary is called Minera Can-Am, but Vizsla Minera Can-Am garbage cans on the side of the road.
Oh,
That's
wow.
that's all you see from Vizsla.
Uh-huh.
And if
Well,
you,
actually, I've
yeah,
just driven on the toll road. I haven't gone
yeah.
the other way.
Well, that way, I mean, you're saving yourself about 4 hours on the toll road, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Well, and you're also being recognized for your work in Sinaloa because I saw an interview you did with somebody else not too long ago, and you were talking about some economic studies that they've done and how and this is something that I don't think a lot of people understand about Canadian companies in Mexico is the high quality, high paying jobs that you create. And you're still in the exploration and development stage, and already you're getting a good scorecard.
Yeah, we had a meeting with the Secretary of Economy, and he actually brought out this table, and he said, we're the municipality of Concordia has created the most new high-paying jobs in the state of Sinaloa, and that was directly related to us. We were basically the only growth in those high-paying jobs in first of all the municipality and then also the state. So that was the Secretary of Economy. We actually didn't know that until he showed us that data, which was great. And then we've been able to we've actually had the secretary at the project a number of times, and we've got a great relationship with the government of the state of Sinaloa as well, which has been excellent. And they certainly recognize the value. I think it's important too. There's a lot of the headlines you'll see are and it's often like this anywhere around the world, but the negative sensationalist stuff around cartel violence and things like that. But when you spend time in Sinaloa and you're part of that business community there, and you see the value that we can bring through creating this through building this mine, it's great to see that. And there is a lot of good news out of this, and as a result the state is quite supportive of our plans and what we want to do.
Yeah, I get it gets sensationalized, as does the state of Zacatecas. Fresnillo and the city of Zacatecas are known to have a very high crime rate. But you know something, Michael, I've lived in Zacatecas for 8 years, and I've never even seen something shady going on where, like when I drive in Vancouver, if I drive through the downtown east side, I can see people shooting up right beside the police station. You don't see any of that in Mexico, in Zacatecas and Fresnillo, and it's more about the interfighting of the cartels between each other and certain hot spots. And you're way down at the southern end of Sinaloa. The trouble is more up north.
Yeah, exactly. And Mazatlan, I was just there again at the end of the year, and it was. it's just back to normal
Yeah.
uh, in Mazatlan. So it's an unfortunate part of the social, I guess, environment, I suppose, of Sinaloa right now. But I think
Yeah.
with more, good business like mines and things like that, hopefully it helps change that issue.
Well, it's really interesting that the economic minister, or what, I'm not sure if I'm calling him the right
Secretary of
secretary,
Economy. Yeah.
yeah, is recognizing these things. And I think that that message is getting back to Scheinbaum because, you know, depending on how much it has an effect on the GDP, where mining really has an effect is on the high paying jobs. Like I live in a gated community here in Zacatecas, and there's a bunch of, you see Camino Rojos, you see all the Fresnillo, you see all the mining company people live in these. They have nice trucks, they have nice houses. These mining jobs create high paying jobs, and I think that message is getting through to Scheinbaum.
Yeah, and I think that she's quite aware of the importance of mining, and certainly as silver is a critical mineral as part of the environment, the green revolution, call it, of solar panels and things like this. So I don't think that's lost on her. Whereas I think AMLO certainly didn't want to admit that so much, right? It was kind of I think it was almost like a personal vendetta against mining companies, perhaps the families that own mining companies in Mexico. I don't want to speculate too much, but I think it's clear that Scheinbaum understands the link between the metal that's in the ground and the green revolution that she's trying to support.
Well, she has experience in economics and in environmental studies, and she's brilliant. Actually, I'm really impressed with Scheinbaum.
Well, she did a heck of a better job with Trump than Trudeau did. I saw
Absolutely,
that. As a
absolutely.
result, of course, Trudeau has been ousted as our prime minister. But
So, if you look at things from an economic and a environmental situation, especially here domestically in Mexico, this is a perfect environment for solar energy, alternative energy. Everywhere you go, you see solar panels. And you want those solar panels, you need silver.
yeah, absolutely. And well, and it's I think silver, and I've been hearing this a lot from sell side groups and buy side groups, and just generally, the scuttlebutt, it seems like, is that everybody expects silver to do quite well in 2025. And I think if you just take a simple look at the supply deficit, it's very clear that the price needs to go up to meet that demand. It's I think the fourth consecutive year of about 10 to 20% supply deficit as outlaid by the Silver Institute. And I've done
Now,
a bit of
folks,
work
by
on.
the way, that are listening into this, that how that equates is the mining industry produces 800,000 ounces of silver. The deficit is 200 million ounces of silver. That's gone on for 4 years. So that's 1 year's total silver production has been in deficit for the last 4 years. What I'm curious about, Michael, is that, and why I think there's an explosive move coming for silver, is where is that coming from?
Well, I was just going to say that's the I've done a bit of work on that, and the estimates that I've come across is that there's about 1 billion to maybe about 1.5 billion ounces available, kind of ready supply on the industrial side, that could kind of fill that deficit. So we're pretty much through the available above ground supply. At certain higher prices, people will
But
start sending.
where is that coming from exactly, Michael?
It's from groups that have basically stockpiled it as an investment, bullion or coins, and also just large quantities of it held as an investment on the
But
sideline.
that could tighten up really quickly if the price of silver is going up and people want
Oh,
to hold on
but
for dear life.
but I think that we've already gone through much of that, perhaps as high as 75% of that available supply, which means that, I don't
So
think
you're
any.
talking above ground supply,
Yeah, exactly,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Outside of the annual mine production and recycling production. So it's I think the day of reckoning for the silver price is coming soon. Mind you, we don't need we're not a company that needs a $100 silver to make a profit here. It's anything over $10 will do, for us. But nonetheless, I think if you start to do the math of what $40, $50, et cetera, silver looks like on our economics, it's going to be just absolutely incredible. And I do think that I hope at least, but I also think that our timeline to production could very much coincide with a very explosive move and a sustained move in silver instead of just the historic spike up and waterfall down. I think that this time around, it's going to be a more sustained and steady price increase, but an explosive one that's going to maintain.
Well, I agree with you because you got all this demand coming from solar. India and China are India and Russia are starting to look at it as a reserve currency. Before we went on, I was reading an article about solid state batteries, and that could be the trend for electric vehicles in the future, but also for robots. And what people, there you can buy a robot right now for $16,000.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. And so it's coming. And if the trend is to go to solid state batteries that are carbon and silver, that could be another big demand on silver beyond the solar panels.
Well, and one of the biggest issues I think historically for silver was it was used and it relates to the solar, but it was used in film and in the photography industry. And of course that with the advent of the digital camera became basically that demand profile was just eliminated practically.
Yeah.
But I don't see any of these demand segments of the demand profile here really going anywhere. I see them all growing substantially over the coming decades. So robots, or whether it's AI computing, everything like this needs electronics, and when you have electronics, there's a need for silver as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's great for silver. I suspect that hopefully, our day will come for copper one of these days. Copper should be much higher,
They
but
have similar supply and demand characteristics, silver and copper.
yeah, yeah. But
You
there's just
know,
more copper, and certainly more copper mines out there than silver
yeah,
mines. But
exactly.
that's the other interesting aspect. Of course, if we're talking more on the demand side, but on the supply side, the amount of, I mean, even Panuco. Let's say we do 20 to, let's say 20 million ounces annually. We're about 12 million ounces of silver in that equivalency. That's I mean that's a fraction of the deficit, right? So you'd have to put dozens of Panucos into production in order to meet
And
that
there
deficit.
just aren't those out there. They're not.
Yeah. So
If you want to be looking for silver mines of the future, if you want to be looking for silver exploration, all roads lead to Mexico. I
yeah,
hate to tell you folks, but if you want silver, primary,
yeah.
all roads lead to Mexico.
And that's the interesting part of the primary supply, of course, of silver is from byproduct and mostly from base metal mines in South America. And most of those base metal mines in South America are gigantic, mega open pits. That can't. If the world wants more silver, they don't just turn up the production there and produce more silver. It's really a function of what those base metal primary markets are doing. So it's really interesting. It's a very tight market. It can be a very explosive market. And I think we've actually seen evidence of this deficit in the last 5 years of silver price. It has moved very well. We're sitting close to 30 here. When we started our work here in Mexico, I think we are trying to raise money first, and silver was like $15 an ounce.
That
So
was just a few years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think we're seeing it in real time. But of course, we also have 40% of our value in gold, and gold is doing extremely well as well. So I think we're in two excellent commodities to be in. And I like I said earlier, I'm thrilled for what 2025 has in store for Vizsla.
Well, I'm really excited about silver as well. And I'm really glad we got to talk about your insights because you're a guy on the ground with the silver project. I just see, I don't think in my 30 years of being in this business, Michael, that I've ever seen a metal so such a coiled spring as silver based on supply and demand as it is right now. Like, I think there's an explosive move coming for silver that not many people are really paying attention to it yet.
No, and the the multiples that we see, on any company that's kind of a secular company, the S&P 500, et cetera, on revenue and the valuations that companies get now. I think imagine if there's a world in which silver is in vogue and these mining companies are in vogue, and we start to get those priced earnings or NPV or NAV multiples that these other companies get. It could just be incredible for the mining space. And of course, it does happen in cycles, right? It's eventually going to happen again for us, but and that's why we've been diligent. We've had that New York listing. We're one of a handful of New York companies, listed companies. Now we're TSX listed as well, so we're one of a handful of TSX listed silver companies out there. So I think Vizsla is in an excellent position to receive the re-rating and the spotlight when the focus does come on to silver. Now, without that, we're still, I think, going to create a lot of value for shareholders, because if you look at even SilverCrest in this
Just
period,
look at the numbers now. If you just use today's numbers, you got an IRR over 100%. That's phenomenal.
yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a widget factory or whatever. That's good business. So,
That's a good business to be in. Sorry, I interrupted you as you were going to say something about Silvercrest.
well, I just you think back to SilverCrest and other silver development companies as well. Mag was a little bit of a slower timeline, but this period between, call it PEA, and the transition into studies, feasibility, and then into development, into production, has created a lot of value for shareholders in the
Yeah.
past. I think that again, we're fully funded for this year. Our goal is to become even more funded for the capex. I suspect that the pathway forward for us should be pretty bright for Vizsla.
Well, if I had 100 million extra dollars, I would lend it to you in a heartbeat because those numbers are amazing.
Well, and the best part is you'd get it back in less than a year. I do.
I,
Well,
I actually wouldn't want the cash back. I would convert it to stock.
oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's a good business model. There's a few groups out there doing it, but
so we got to wrap it up here in the next couple minutes. Catalysts going forward. I mean, a big one is your exploration. And there was a statistic in your update that was quite interesting. You're finding ounces for like less than 50 cents a share, right? Or 50
yeah,
cents an ounce.
40, I think 41 cents an ounce, just all in discovery costs. That's property acquisition. That's kind of everything it costs for us to run in Mexico. It's 40 cents, and
And
that's
you're
so.
wide open. You've only really explored 10%. And what I know about these clusters of epithermal veins, like just Fresnillo, for example, you got a pod of veins that were mined for 500 years. Right beside that, you got another series of veins that have been mined for probably 40 years. And right beside that, you've got a mine that's been mining for a few years.
Yeah.
So, you've got all of that wide open throughout your project. So you got a lot of exploration potential.
Yeah, I absolutely believe. I think we've drilled a few targets now. We've got two rigs solely focused on exploration this year. 10,000 meters to start, but of course we can grow that if it calls for that, which I suspect it will. And we've got the test mine going, so we'll have news out on the test mine, feasibility study coming. Anything kind of relating to project finance that ideally we're able to announce in 2025. But it's going to be one of these years where the steady path forward is de-risking, moving towards production, but the blue sky upside is that 10,000 meter drill program again to start. We're used to doing 100,000 meter plus drill programs, so it feels kind of small to us. But 10,000 meters is actually pretty decent for a company. So, and then
And
we're going to do some.
10,000 has a way in these epithermal vein clusters of turning into 20 and 30,000 pretty quickly when you start. I mean, it's amazing when you can get your drill hole into the ground in a cluster. It's amazing what can come out of that. Look at Copala. Copala is a blind vein, folks. They were looking for another vein with their drill rig and found Copala, which pushes a lot of the resource. So, that's another pleasant thing about surprise that these epithermal vein clusters have is a lot of the veins don't even come to surface. And the way you find them is with the truth machine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's nothing like getting that drill out there and hunting for the next big discovery. So we're doing that this year, and that I think is a lot of that blue sky upside. But saving that, if you even take that out, if you look at SilverCrest and other companies, this pathway into production has always been something that creates value for shareholders. Certainly when a company is funded, where it causes problems is where the capex is 100 times the market cap, and there's no way to raise that money. But fortunately for us,
Well, and you could people can put knocks against you, but the reality is that here's the capex, here's your valuation, and if they want to put knocks against your ability to build the mine, you got a guy there in Simon who has built 40 mines, and one of them is a direct analog to what you're building here. And it's one of the big successes in mining in the last few years, which is SilverCrest.
exactly. So Simon, we were going to have a webinar tomorrow, and one of the notes is that we call Simon our not so secret weapon because he's everybody kind of heard of him now, but he is our absolutely our weapon there. So it's great. So we're I think 2025 is going to be a great year, and I think it's going to create a lot of value for our shareholders.
Awesome. You're a unique situation, catalyst rich in a silver primary project. And really, there just aren't enough of those out there. So if generalist investors get excited in silver stocks, I think that Silvercrest, or I mean, now that Silvercrest is gone, I think Vizsla Silver will bubble up to the cream will rise to the top, as they say,
Yeah.
Michael.
Well, looking forward to it. So, well, thank you very much, Allan.
Yeah,
It's
but
great to catch up.
awesome. We'll do it again soon. Keep up the great work. Congratulations to your whole team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, there you go, folks. If you're bullish on silver and you want to look at a company that has a development track to near-term production and also wide open exploration potential, Vizsla is one you want to do your homework on. And as always, you should do your homework and speak with your financial advisors before making any investment decisions. And keep in mind that they are a sponsor of my work. But whether a company is a sponsor or a pick, they all go through the same filter based on my 30 years of experience in the mining business. And they don't pay me for my opinion. That's based on my experience. And in my experience, I haven't seen very many companies like Vizsla. And I think they're a very special situation that you should check out. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.